What? Why are you shaking your head? You're welcome.
Hey guys, what is going on? Welcome to the wildcard weekend edition of the Underdog Drafter Party. I'm Jake Tribbey, here with my co-host, one of the best football writers around, Ryan Heath. Me and Ryan are going to be drafting some Battle Royale teams, talking about our favorite scroll down options, and discussing contest-specific strategy throughout the show. We can also get to any pressing playoff questions you guys may have. Ryan, how you doing, man? It's the playoffs. I always feel like this weekend, next weekend, two of my favorite football weekends of the year. How are you doing? What do you think about the games we got coming up this week?
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. I like this slate a lot, actually. It kind of has set up perfectly as like a 6-game Battle Royale slate. Like there's at least somewhat interesting, viable options in pretty much all of the games. So yeah, I'm excited to get into it with you here.
Yeah, man, should be a great show. A little trickier this week, especially compared to last week where we had a ton of fantastic values. This week doesn't really feel like there are a ton of great values by ADP. So, to me, I just really want to prioritize stacking with my quarterback. Obviously, we'll go player by player here as we talk through the positions. But, guys like Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, you can sort of get away with not stacking them. For the most part, though, I really want to focus on team and game stacks because, again, there just isn't a ton of value. I think really just nailing the couple games that end up shooting out this week will be the key to victory on these wildcard slates. Ryan, let's start with the quarterback position here. Josh Allen, I think at an ADP of 5, if this was week 13, I'd be like, this is completely ridiculous. For the playoff slate, though, where we sort of expect Josh Allen to go Superman mode, I mean, when he wants to, the guy can score 35 DraftKings points pretty much whenever. I think an ADP of, 5-6 for Josh Allen is actually fairly reasonable on this slate. Probably the only hole that you can pick is this is a fairly deep slate at quarterback. Obviously, we have Lamar, Jane Daniels, Jalen Hurts, even guys down to like QB8, QB10 who are pretty reasonable here. How are you viewing sort of a, relatively early ADP on Josh Allen versus the rest of the quarterbacks on this slate here?
Yeah, so the quarterback position is definitely the deepest position on the slate. Which I mean makes sense. Playoff slate. You hope that there's good good fantasy quarterbacks on playoff teams. Yeah. That is at least the case this year. But I think you're right in that the end of round 1 ADP is not super offensive just because every other position is not all that deep. I would say there are like 6 elite plays at the skill positions. They're right there on the right side of your screen, the first 6 guys listed. After that, yeah, give me Josh Allen. That's totally fine. But I mean, moving down, yeah, you're not. I certainly don't want to have like oversized Josh Allen exposure at the expense of all those other skill position guys. Jaden Daniels and Baker Mayfield at cost, I think, stand out the most to me. That this is just a close spread game, only a 3-point spread, the highest over-under of the slate. Really good schematic matchup for Mayfield in particular, with all the man coverage and all the blitzes that the Commanders like to dial up. Mayfield leads all quarterbacks in the league in fantasy points per dropback against the blitz. Ahead of Josh Allen, ahead of all those hypermobile guys, which is very impressive to me. Daniels, we just, in any game he hasn't been hurt, he's been amazing pretty much. So hard to argue too much there. Jalen Hurts, I guess I like Hurts the least of these top 6 at cost. That's really just because his ceiling kind of relies on does he score multiple tush-push touchdowns. This is not a game that we expect to necessarily shoot out. I mean, it's 2 teams meeting each other that are bottom 3 in neutral pass rate, bottom 10 in seconds per play. Like they like playing slow. They like running the ball. Not super conducive to shootouts, but yeah, I mean, again, Jalen Hurts can just kind of sidestep all that if he decides to fall in the end zone a couple times, but not something I want to take a huge stance on. I think my favorite scroll down here has got to be Bo Nix. We talked about it a little bit on caching points, but There's like a consensus here, I think, that the odds makers are really disrespecting the Broncos here with the 8.5-point spread. Like I get it. Josh Allen is going to go do insane Josh Allen things, but that also means that the Broncos are likely going to be chasing points this entire game. Is Bo Nix up to that challenge? I think he might be. We've seen the Bills secondary get kind of roasted, especially over the middle of the field by the Rams and by the Lions in recent weeks. I don't think the Broncos are as capable as those teams of doing something similar, of taking advantage of those Bills linebackers. But I mean, we have seen a guy like Marvin Mims kind of in this screeny, slot heavy, even out of the backfield role, kind of doing some similar stuff to that. So I don't hate the idea of a Bo Nix double on this slate. Really easy way to get different, just stacking him up with a Cortland Sutton, who is the only receiver that runs a full-time route share on the Broncos, plus a Marvin Mims, just kind of hoping that you luck box into a couple of those big plays with that kind of schematic convergence between Mims and the Bills. I think those are the biggest things that stick out to me. Anything you wanted to add? You are muted, Jake. Wow, brutal.
Oh, got me. That might be my first mute on the drafter party all year. I think I've gotten God on caching points a couple times, but man, can't believe that. I was just going to say though that after Bo Nix is off the board, after this QB8 range sort of ends, I checked the lobby earlier. I don't believe that there are going to be any like 10-man, 12-man drafts this week. So I suppose this isn't a huge concern because you will always have access to a top 8 quarterback. But did just want to highlight massive projection drop off after Nix is off the board. Looking at Stroud's projection, Love's projection, Russell Wilson's projection, Stafford's projection. Those are still guys that I want a little bit of exposure to if I'm drafting a ton of teams, maybe not Russell Wilson as much as those other three, but did want to note that there is a pretty serious drop off between Nix and these next few quarterbacks here. Don't think I have anything else to add outside of, and this was something Scott Barrett noted in one of his like editing comments when we were working on our slate breakdown, which is live over at FantasyPoints.com. If you guys are interested in sort of a full, more DFS-centric slate breakdown where we write up all the relevant plays. But these rushing quarterbacks are going to run more in the playoffs, and that's something that's extremely important to note. We're about to jump over to running back, where we expect RB1s to get their biggest workloads of the season. So very important to keep in mind for a playoff slate is that usage really condenses around the best players. That includes quarterbacks who run the football. Ryan, let's move on to running back, which I think is maybe a little bit more interesting than quarterback this week. Again, though, still not a ton of great value on the board overall. I think the main thing that sticks out to me is Aaron Jones is going to be mega chalk in DFS. I can't really say that I love it. I know this is something you and me have sort of talked about throughout the week. He's relatively cheap, and there just aren't many places to go at cheap running back this week. If I do want Aaron Jones exposure, though, I think doing so in Battle Royale, where he's the RB9, certainly makes a bit more sense, a reasonable ADP of 25. Beyond that, I mean, honestly, I think you could make a pretty solid argument that Bucky Irving could be, the overall 101 on this slate. Initially, his projection for us was significantly higher. We have him with 18.3 underdog points, which is about half a point higher than both Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry. And part of that is because, we're trying to project a true median for these guys. And I think in most worlds, Sean Tucker, Rashad White are going to work in for a couple touches. However, I also think, maybe 50, 60% chance, could argue it's higher. Bucky Irving just gets every single backfield touch here. If that's the case, if we just gave him Rashad White's projection and Sean Tucker's projection, I mean, we'd be projecting him for 25, 26 underdog points. Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry are around 18. So, this could be an absolutely massive workload for Bucky Irving, again, in the best game environment of the slate. I love him at an ADP of around 5.5, 6. I've had a couple drafts at the 1-2 turn. You get the last pick in the first round, first pick in the second, where I land Bucky and Puka. I mean, I'm just over the moon about that. What an incredible start. Anything to add at running back, Ryan? Those are the two biggest things that stand out to me.
Yeah, definitely a very good week to end up on the turn, I would say.
Yeah.
Other than that, I guess I'll just chime in on the Aaron Jones thing a little bit. We all kind of agreed on caching points that the Aaron Jones chalk and also the Vikings chalk doesn't make a lot of sense to us. But yeah, if you can get him at RB8 in BR, because you certainly could see him go out there as a bell cow. We've seen that happen with Aaron Jones in the playoffs in the past, and he's crushed on wild card weekend certainly before. There's the concern that whatever his injury is flares up like it has over these past 2 weeks, and we see Cam Akers goal line touches, but you can definitely see the world where Jones is a full-on bell cow. I guess I want to call out James Cook as well. I know I just spent a bunch of time talking up Bo Nix and the Broncos, but if Vegas is right and that 8.5 point spread is correct, James Cook has been destroying in games that the Bills win by multiple scores this year. That's like pretty much it. He's another guy where there's at least a possibility that the team says, okay, we've been holding James Cook to like a 45 to a 50% snap share and opportunity share for most of the season. But just putting him in all the high leverage situations and all the red zone situations, they could say, okay, it's the playoffs. We're just gonna run him out there on most of our plays now because we can and we like him the most. I'd say like slightly less likely that happens than it does with Aaron Jones, or maybe about the same. But either way, just if game script is in Cook's favor, that's something you have to be interested in. And the last thing I wanted to say is I think running back really just falls off after J.K. Dobbins on this slate. Dobbins, I think, a fairly similar play to Aaron Jones. Other than I actually feel way better about the Chargers' chances of keeping this game in control and winning. I really feel like this spread should be closer to 6 points than to 2.5 points, which is what we're showing on the screen here. We have seen Dobbins be at about a 60% backfield opportunity share. We kind of know that they like him the most. We've seen like Hassan Haskins kind of mix in for some red zone stuff, but I think that this would be another spot where I just wouldn't be surprised if it's J.K. Dobbins getting nearly every backfield touch, which we have seen at a few points throughout the season. Like it's not like they've never done it before. He's one I definitely am. I'm reaching for J.K. Dobbins, I find, in a lot of my drafts because I'm like, okay, I can fill in my second running back here. And sometimes there's guys behind me that only have 1 or 0 running backs at that point. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, thanks for the EV. Like you're not going to score any points at running back this week, I guess, once I take J.K. Dobbins. Really, really want to get 2 top 9 running backs on as many teams as possible.
Yeah, I certainly think that's a fair take. I also think this isn't a terrible week to go with some 3 wide receiver builds. Obviously not something I'll be doing a ton. Most weeks I probably end up 80-90% to running back builds. This week I'm probably a little bit more comfortable around like 65-60% to running back builds because again, it just falls off pretty massively after Dobbins is off the board. You guys can see, my Dobbins exposure got him on, about 1 in every 6 teams that I've drafted so far, courtesy of the great tools over at bestballoverlay.com. You'll see once we get into some of the drafts, they have awesome combinatorial ownership tools. So you can see how common you've been drafting certain combinations of players. Can also see game spreads, implied team totals, where the spread opened, and also weather data, which normally would be super helpful for this late in the season. Actually, a shockingly good weather week, Ryan, as you and me discussed earlier today. But definitely check out bestballoverlay.com. Can save $10 a month on that subscription with promo code PARTY. Again, that's promo code PARTY. Ryan, let's move over to wide receiver here. To me, all these top options make a ton of sense. I think AJ Brown is probably the guy I'm the most hesitant on. Could also bucket Nico Collins in there. I'm just a bit concerned about the game environment for both players. I know you noted the matchup for Nico Collins just really isn't strong this week. Beyond that, though, Puka Nacua is profiling as a really, really strong play. Even head and shoulders above Justin Jefferson. We have Nacua right now, 18.6 underdog points. Jefferson sort of the next tier down at 17. Then it's Evans at 16.4, and then a pretty big drop off before you get to Nico, McConkey, AJ Brown. How are you sort of seeing these top end wide receivers this week?
Yeah, pretty similarly to you. I guess the guy I want to chime in on is Mike Evans. There's going to be a lot of discussion about him versus Marshawn Lattimore. I am inclined to just kind of fade all those concerns on the DraftKings main slate as well as here. yes, Evans' track record against the Saints since they drafted Lattimore is pretty rough, but Lattimore hasn't even shadowed him in 3 out of their last 4 meetings. We don't know if Dan Quinn is actually going to use Lattimore to shadow Evans. We don't know that Lattimore is actually any good anymore. Like, I don't think it's all that certain that he is just this lockdown guy at this point in his career. Is there going to be like some ejection risk for Mike Evans when he's on a field with Marshawn Lattimore? Yes. But the overall matchup and game environment just kind of outweighs that for me pretty easily. So I'm going to be pretty happy to be vacuuming up Mike Evans at an ADP of 8. But yeah, I'm with you on Collins and AJ Brown. A little hard to get excited there. But beyond that, it really just kind of becomes about game stacks. Like, I find myself fairly indifferent between a Ladd McConkey, a Terry McLaurin, and a Cortland Sutton, and it really just winds up being on this build in this draft, which of their quarterbacks do I want to build and do I want to stack? And that kind of ends up being the guy I click. I guess the last thing I'll mention is that Jordan Addison shows as a pretty strong value. By DraftKings scoring, he's the wide receiver 6 on this slate since week 13. He's priced down from that both on the main slate and here in Battle Royale. He's as the wide receiver 9. Pretty strong, like definitely works in a double with Darnold and alongside Jefferson. Kind of works as leverage off of a Justin Jefferson. I think you can have Addison as like a one-off piece and have that be pretty appealing. But yeah, I mean, beyond him and McMillan, I stop really caring about standalone plays, and it just becomes about, I'll take this guy if he fits my stack, and I'm not that interested if he doesn't.
Yeah. Again, I mean, I think this is just a huge week for stacking and correlation, especially in smaller field contests, as we have talked about previously. Did want to highlight a couple other values here. Quentin Johnston is just a guy who I think everyone is like, oh, so gross, contested catch specialist who doesn't create any separation. He is projecting as a decent value for us. Only 35.4 ADP, but higher projection than George Pickens, Cooper Kupp, Rashad Bateman, Marvin Mims, all of whom are going higher. Marvin Mims, I also think is pretty interesting. I've been taking a lot of Bo Nix at the end of drafts, and I really like if you need, say you get some solid value to start and you just want a lower owned combo to sort of round things out. I think Bo Nix, Marvin Mims is arguably my favorite. Ryan, do you want to talk a little bit about the matchup for Mims? Because I think this is one of the better schematic edges we found this week.
Definitely, yeah. So the Bills are top 3 in receiving yards per game allowed to all of screen passes, to the slot, and also to the backfield. And really, over the last month or so, Mims has kind of been shifted into this. You could call it like a more gadgety role, but really just this role where he's running all these routes out of the backfield in the slot, getting all these screens. Over 5 yards per out run out of the slot on the season, which is kind of insane. Over 4 yards per out run out of the backfield. Relatively small samples we're working with here, obviously, but seems like Sean Payton kind of likes Mims as his guy to scheme up in those situations. It's where the Bills have been most vulnerable over the middle of the field. So he works. I don't know that honestly, it's a thin enough Battle Royale slate that I think he's fine as like a one-off scroll down. That's not like the most offensive thing to me ever. Probably more interested in him on the main slate, or as we mentioned earlier, as a part of like a Bo Nix double stack.
Yeah. Certainly think that is reasonable. Guys like Zacchaeus or some of these lower end Green Bay guys, I think, are also fine if you just want to stack up with the quarterback and save a little bit on ownership. Not something I'm going to be doing a ton, but at least worth noting. Only other late round guy I wanted to throw out there is Cooper Kupp. I get that he hasn't done, really anything since week 13. But this is Cooper Kupp. I believe it's a solid slot funnel matchup against Minnesota, right? If I'm not mistaken here. So, I think he's a little bit interesting as sort of a late round grab, especially if you are stacking up this Rams-Vikings game, which is one of the better spots on the slate right there with Tampa Bay, Washington, sort of in my eyes. All right, let's move on to tight end here. Tight end is really tough this week, Ryan. Again, pretty similar to wide receiver where there aren't a ton of great values that are really popping. So I largely just want my tight ends paired with my quarterbacks, I will say that at least based on our projections, Pat Freiermuth is popping as arguably the best value of the slate at tight end, 32 ADP. He's our tight end 2 in terms of underdog projection. Mark Andrews also obviously popping, given the news. Zay Flowers will not be playing this week. Where are you at on tight end? Anything to add outside of pair your tight end with your quarterback, or make sure it's a similar game?
Yeah, it's pretty much the most pair your tight end with your quarterback in your game stack week of all time, I think. Yeah. Just kind of nobody stands out here. I find myself in terms of who, Ryan, you have to draft a standalone tight end at least some of the time on Underdog. Who are you doing? I'm clicking Andrews the most often, I guess, but yeah, I'm really not that upset if it just falls all the way to. I'll click Tucker Kraft and I'll save on ownership. He's been pretty good in games without Christian Watson, even if the volume hasn't been good. He's been very efficient and has had a nose for the end zone. But yeah, I'm definitely not taking big stands at tight end this week. And I feel like I say that every week, but I really, really mean it this week, like more than I ever have before.
Yeah, I'm in a similar boat. After Andrews is off the board, we have 10 tight ends projected between 6.5 and 9 underdog points. So very, very tight tier between, pretty much all the subsequent guys. After let's see here, I believe Schultz is, he's the tight end 10, tight end 11 is Disley. I think most people are sort of cutting it off there and saying, I don't want any exposure. I'm a little interested in Tyler Higbee within Rams game stacks. Coaches have sort of noted, or McVay himself has noted, that they really like Higbee. They want to get him out there more. They expect him to play more in the playoffs. He was at a 42% route share last week. I could easily see that being closer to 70%. Problem is Rams tight ends haven't been super effective, but I also think Higbee is sort of the only guy they like in that room. Again, it's sort of extreme only for large field tournaments to save on ownership, something I'm only doing on Stafford or Sam Darnold teams. But just a note for people who are drafting like 50 teams, 100 teams, I wouldn't totally want to forget about a guy like Tyler Higbee. All right, Ryan, let's hop into a couple drafts here. Ryan, I have to ask while we wait for a Wildcat to fill, which game are you most looking forward to from a fantasy perspective, which I think is a bit more straightforward? And then which game are you most looking forward to from just a football fan, watching the game's perspective?
I think it's the same answer for both questions. Actually, I think it's just the Commanders Bucks game. Yeah, that might be, honestly, you could criticize me as a football fan there. I think I let fantasy overtake my interest in football and in watching football. Like if we're not happy in fantasy, if fun things aren't happening for fantasy scoring, then I'm just like, this game sucks. Why are they running the ball all the time? But yeah, I mean, that's not what we expect the Commanders Bucks game to be. Hope to God, hopefully pray. So yeah, just always give me a shootout. That's just always what I'm most interested in.
Yeah, no, I certainly think that's fair. For me, I think, from a fantasy perspective, same boat as you. Tampa Bay, Washington is just the best game on the slate. It's the slate I'm trying to stack up the most, both in my DFS lineups and obviously in Battle Royale. All right, and we drew a 106 here, which is really, really strong. I think this is arguably the best week of the year to draft at the end of the round, because again, I mean, you could argue Puka Nacua, Bucky Irving should be the 101 on their own, and I have seen a couple draft rooms where both players have made it to the 106-201 turn, which is just really, really strong. I was going to say, though, from a football perspective, I think the game I'm the most excited to watch is Denver Buffalo, mostly because I think, these are both teams where the quarterbacks are just going to do everything they can to put the team on their back, both from a running and throwing perspective. Both guys should be pretty aggressive throwing the ball downfield, and both guys should be running a ton. So I think that'll be a really interesting, sort of battle of quarterbacks. But granted, you could kind of say that about almost all of these games, except for, some of the games that are on pace or, per Vegas have a significantly lower total, like, Chargers Texans, I think has a pretty good chance to play really, really slow. Same thing with something like Philadelphia, Green Bay. Although it would be really fun if those games sped up. I just don't really want to bet on it. I think Buffalo, Denver could certainly play a bit faster than people anticipate, which is part of the reason I want to draft a bit more Bo Nix than the field will have in Battle Royale. And I think I'm going to play a good amount of Bo Nix in DFS as well.
Yeah, look at that. It wrapped back around into a fantasy take for you. You can't even pretend like it was a real NFL take. It's I think this game will play faster than the market's expecting. So of course this is going to be my favorite real football game to watch. Yeah. No, I'm with you though. I got to be honest. Can I be honest about something, guys? I'm a little scared that both of the games are going to suck tomorrow for the Saturday games. Yeah, Chargers Texans, like we have seen Ravens Steelers be absolutely terrible like a month ago. I don't know. I feel like everyone's gonna be saying on Twitter, "Oh my God, the NFL product is dying. It's so terrible." Like that. If you scroll Twitter tomorrow at 11 Eastern time, that's probably what you're going to be reading. And then hopefully we'll get at least a couple of absolute classics on Sunday. But yeah, that's kind of how I'm anticipating it. I'm Evans here. Yeah,
I'm kind of with you here. Yeah, and I think Puka Evans is probably the way I want to go. I mean, we could debate, maybe grabbing an Allen or a Jackson. Puka, we're drafting for sure. Yeah, I think I just want to go Puka Evans here. And like I said, if we do end up sort of getting pinched into a single running back build with 3 wide receivers, definitely not the end of the world on a slate that is, relatively weak at running back, I'd say, which is crazy. It seems crazy to say with all these options. Maybe I should say lacks the depth at running back that we generally have had, on these really deep running back slates where you can get, like a Tony Pollard who's projecting for 16 points with your last pick. You pretty much never want to draft a wide receiver in your flex on those slates. But on a slate like this, I certainly don't mind 3 wide receiver builds in the hope that you just sort of nail the correct game stack. And yeah, man, I mean, I'm totally with you with these Saturday games. I think Underdog, DraftKings both have Saturday only slates. I think I'm just going to sit those out. I'm not particularly interested, especially on DraftKings where pricing is, really, really tight. Even for a playoff slate, I think they made this, this slate sort of exceptionally tight in terms of pricing. I just don't really see significant edges when it comes to that. I think if you want to sweat on Saturday, you just bet on the Chargers -2.5, and you hope they absolutely roll the Texans, which every single sharp that I have talked to has said that is their lean, which is, I don't know, makes it interesting that the line really hasn't moved throughout the week, because I was, hearing guys that I respect a lot on Wednesday, Thursday saying, oh yeah, Chargers roll, and line still stayed pretty flat. So market certainly has some respect for Houston. I wouldn't necessarily say that I do, though. Do you have a take on that game?
I've been, Jake, I feel like every person I've been on a show with this week, and this is my 4th show of the week. I've been on a lot of shows this week. I have posed this question to, I feel like, everybody, like, someone please give me an alternative opinion on this Chargers Texans game, because there are 0 Texans believers in America right now. And I completely understand why. And I completely agree. And I can't even make like a convincing case on the other side, which really scares me. And again, I was tweeting about this earlier this week. I do not bet spreads. This is why I will feel like this. Semi often, I always lose when I do. I like Andrews here, kind of, but
you like
definitely
Andrews?
dropped a running back.
Yeah,
definitely dropped a running back first, but yeah, I kind of like Andrews as well.
All right, I think I'm gonna go Dobbins first. I just want a little bit more Dobbins than Aaron Jones. To me, they're like roughly the same play. I know Aaron Jones has a little bit more juice in the passing game. But man, I mean, I'm just really worried about the injury stuff with Jones. Like last 2 weeks, I sort of jammed Jones in DFS, anticipating a full workload, because, guys like Aaron Jones, significantly more efficient than their backup running back. When teams are playing with their back against the wall, fighting for the number 1 seed like Minnesota was, you sort of expect these monster workloads. And then, both of these last 2 games, he's come out with injuries. Maybe I just have a little too much PTSD from him, partially tanking my main event team, but man, I mean, I have a really tough time with Aaron Jones this week. And I know from listening to Cashing Points that you and the crew feel pretty similarly. Where you at on Aaron Jones?
Yeah, we kind of have had this same conversation about Aaron Jones like every 2 or 3 weeks this year. It feels like, in terms of, oh man, he's priced way too cheap. He would be such a good play if they roll him out there on 70+% of the snaps. Can you imagine? Like that would be so sick.
Oh yeah.
And it has happened a couple times down the stretch of the season. It's not been during any of the weeks that anyone has expected it to, though. There was it was like 1 or 2 games after he got like semi-benched for the fumble. It like happened when no one expected it to. Yeah, and then there's been like the injury stuff that has clouded it. Yeah, it's really hard, man. I just want to do whatever the opposite of whatever the field does on Aaron Jones, at least on the main slate. Yeah, but also to go back to what you were saying earlier, I very much with you on. I don't have any interest in playing the Saturday only slate. We were about like halfway through the second Saturday game on cashing points. When I realized that Hilo and Johnny were like talking about the Saturday slate, and I was like, oh wait, I probably should have been like posting as if some of these are actually real plays, because they are on the Saturday slate, but so many guys just are not real plays on the 6-game slate in those Saturday games.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you're drafting or playing on DraftKings for the Saturday only slate, you're thinking about guys like John Mechie and Deontay Johnson, where on the 6-game slate, those guys are largely afterthoughts, guys you're not really getting to unless you are submitting 150 teams. In Battle Royale, you're probably never getting to those guys realistically. All right, Ryan, we're coming up on the 5-6 turn. Baker fell to us, which I think is an auto pick, given we have Mike Evans here. Totally dry at running back. So we're probably looking at another wide receiver for our final pick. Don't really want B-Rob. Where are you at on this last wide receiver pick here?
I mean, you could do Eckler as the Baker run back. I don't think that's necessarily amazing.
Yeah, it's not great. I mean, I probably won't draft many shares of Eckler. I think the bull case for Eckler is somewhat compelling. I know Johnny Proctor on cashing points mentioned that the beats were sort of sick of him or sick of B-Rob and calling for Jeremy McNichols. In the last 4 games he's played with Brian Robinson, he's been at about 60% of snaps, led the way in terms of XFP, pretty even with B-Rob in terms of targets. So I think it's reasonable, probably a bit more upside in some of these wide receivers, but let's grab a share of Eckler. Round that out with a decent team there. Baker Mayfield, J.K. Dobbins, Austin Eckler, Puka Nacua, Mike Evans, Mark Andrews. I mean, could have gone Pickens, could have gone Mims, could have gone Jaden Reed. All of those guys are pretty solid in their own right. Zacchaeus also would have been a viable run back. But, if you get past RB9 and you're desperate, you need a running back. I really think it's just Eckler and there's no one else I'm interested in. Right, Ryan?
Yep. Yeah, no, fully agree.
Awesome.
Yeah, the more drafts I do, the more I realize I'm gonna end up with a bunch of Mark Andrews, just because he always is there on those builds where you can wait on quarterback. Like if you're gonna draft a Herbert or a Mayfield or a Stafford or whatever. I don't know. I mean, I know why people aren't excited to draft Mark Andrews, but like, come on, guys. He's scored in 10 out of his last 12 games. The Ravens have this big implied total. Zay Flowers being out definitely helps him a lot. Over 30% of the first read targets after Flowers left the game last week. So there's like some genuine juice with Andrews as the tight end one on the slate. I guess I'm a little surprised that people are kind of letting him fall down the board so much.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm right there with you. I think especially on this Battle Royale slate where, I wrote up tight ends for our slate breakdown and just absolutely nothing stood out to me. On a slate like that, where you do have a Mark Andrews who's projecting about 1.5, 2 points better than the next closest tight end, you could argue his ADP should be 4 or 5 picks higher. So certainly think there is some decent value there with Mark Andrews. Ryan, this is a $25 fullback dive. So I know I've said this previously, probably haven't said it recently on some shows, but in these smaller field tournaments, like the fullback dive, like the bomb, you really want to prioritize going heavy on team and game stacks because you don't need to be quite as close to the optimal lineup as you would in the Wildcat or the main BR. So I'm generally single stacking more in the Wildcat and the main BR. On these, certainly prefer double stacks, game stacks, using bringbacks more often, stuff like that. And again, this is a slate where we really want to prioritize that. Anyway, so Ryan, I think our path from the 103 is pretty straightforward. We're either drafting one of Jettas or Nacua, or we're drafting Bucky Irving and then hoping to land on a Tampa Bay Washington stack. What direction do you want to go?
Do you want to try to do like or well, we won't necessarily get Evans. So I was going to say Bucky Evans Baker, but which is interesting for fullback dive, but I don't know that we're going to get Evans to fall to us. So probably just click Jefferson and we can start stacking up the Vikings, maybe do a Darnold double.
All right. Yeah, I think that's fair. As double stacks go, I think Darnold double is probably the easiest. I have been fighting for that Bucky Evans Baker. It just hasn't quite fallen to me. I know that it certainly can, depending on the room that you're in, but yeah, it's just a tough sell, and that's part of the reason. I mean, I've done about 15 drafts so far. Really haven't ended up.
The guy at the turn is getting Bucky Evans Baker right now, by the way, which is upsetting. But
so I mean, like,
can't do that from the 103.
This is exactly why we need to draft for volume, Ryan. We got to do 50, 60, 70 drafts at least to get the combos that we want. This isn't DFS where you can just play. You can just play whoever you want within the salary constraints. No, you're at a certain point, it's kind of in God's hands in these battle royale streets. Started out with Jettas, though. Where should we go for our next pick? Obviously, Kyren Williams would sort of be the most obvious run back. I'm not in love with Kyren this week, but it is tough to know where else we would go. We'd be looking at like probably a James Cook or a Joe Mixon, because I'd imagine we fill out our wide receiver slot with this game, right?
Yeah. I think you have to click a running back here.
Yeah. I'm with you.
It may as well be Kyren, unless you really think that like there's a negative correlation for the Rams getting up. I don't think there is, though, necessarily.
Yeah,
so,
I wouldn't say so. I mean, if the game shoots out, Kyren should do well. I think the best case scenario for Kyren is a bit more of like a slow paced game where, maybe Darnold has multiple interceptions, something like that's probably best case for a guy like Kyren Williams. But, obviously he's going to get basically every backfield touch. I mean, who knows if they'll even do the well, I guess they won't anymore because Blake Corum broke his arm. I was going to say if they do the second drive, Blake Corum gets 4 or 5 touches kind of deal, but
we'll get second drive Ronnie Rivers instead.
Oh,
I'm looking forward.
I mean,
to
I
it.
really in a playoff game.
Jake, if that happens, I thanks for saying that, because I need to draft up some tweets just to be ready. I need to
second
just go
drive Ronnie Rivers usage.
Yes, I need to go on a rampage of, oh my God, Ronnie Rivers is coming for Kyren Williams' job, guys.
Yeah,
we did it. We knew this was happening all year. We
you got
about it. Yeah, I just everything everyone said about Corum, I'm gonna say. Yeah,
you got to turn it into a bit about how through 2 drives they're at 50% of snaps each, 50% of backfield XFP each, something like that. I think that would really get. And then like in an hour and a half, everyone's gonna be like, "You're so dumb, like we hate you," but the engagement. The rage
they won't understand.
Cause,
it'll be.
They won't get it.
Yeah, it'll be a good performance art. Yeah, no one will get it, but it'll be amazing.
Yeah. All right. So we've got the 303, and then we're at the 404. I probably want to take Addison here at some point. Darnold's QB6, so we can pretty safely wait on him. I guess the question is, do we take Addison here? Do we stretch it to pick 22? I think that's pretty reasonable based on ADP. If so, we're looking at probably another running back. We could also go.
Yeah, I think we
could
James
go
Cook
Andrews.
Is my preferred click here, or Andrews is fine too. Yeah.
If we go the Andrews route, then I'd probably be looking at Addison and then probably Cooper Kupp as a flex option, and we just full game stack. Hope there's 70 points and nothing else turns out that strong overall. Which for a 6-game slate is a little bit of a thin path, but hey, it's always a thin path to finish first out of 1,000 entries or so. So, what are your thoughts on that so far? We have Kyren, Jettas, and Mark Andrews. I will queue up Addison, and then maybe Cooper Kupp, maybe Aaron Jones if we get sniped on Addison. All those are probably viable.
Yeah,
could also just go like a Cortland Sutton or best available wide receiver if we don't want to go too massive on the stack, but. I think between this game and Tampa Bay, Washington, those are 2 games where I am willing to draft, say, 4 players from the same game. I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, I definitely, especially if it's a Darnold team, I think you definitely want. Yeah. Excuse me. I think you definitely want to double it. So whether it's Addison or Jones works for me. Honestly, I probably not to second guess right after we did it. Addison's gone, so we will have Jones in a second viable running back, so that's fair enough at least. I don't know if I would have liked the version much with the 3 wide receiver build, but this kind of works.
That's fair. I wasn't in love with the idea either. I think at least for this contest type, certainly viable. But yeah, I think we're in a better spot. Also, don't love two running backs from the same game. I mean, I know they both catch passes. Kyron Williams not as much because Stafford never checks down. Yeah, this is sort of a tougher running back combo to sell from an upside perspective. But again, I mean, if the game shoots out, like if this game scores 60 points, 65 points, would anyone be surprised if Kyron and Aaron Jones combined for 3 or 4 touchdowns? I really don't think so. So that's sort of the angle that we're playing. Again, it's not always going to be your favorite angle, especially if you are drafting for volume and you're trying to, trying to diversify throughout your teams. But I think we've made the most of this. I can also queue up Cooper Kupp, who will hopefully make it back to us. Let's see. Darnold's ADP is 32. Kupp's is 30. Do you have a take on who we should draft first here? I think this is a little interesting from a game theory perspective. So B-Tice has no quarterback. He's the only one in between that doesn't have a quarterback.
Show me the board. Show me who has Addison. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the guy we're worried about who would take Darnold potentially. And he's got Evans, Sutton. So he could pretty easily go. I don't think Baker's on the board anymore. Oh, he is. Okay. So he probably drafts Baker, almost certainly.
He's 100% drafting Baker. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, well, you can never say 100% in these underdog streets, Ryan, because there are plenty of people who have the perfect game stack lined up and then say, I think I'll go Justin Herbert here. Derek Brown in the chat here to say Tyler Higbee is the most slept on dude. I'm with you, Derek. I noted him at the top of the show. If you're drafting a decent amount of teams here, Tyler Higbee, I believe he's tight end 12. Certainly shouldn't be forgotten about. Given the recent coach speak on him, given the chance that he could push for 70% of routes in a potential shootout here. Obviously, we already drafted Mark Andrews on this team, but this would be a team where I look at drafting a guy like Tyler Higbee because, again, I think he's really the only tight end that these Rams coaches care to throw the ball to. What were you saying, Ryan?
I completely forget, honestly, what I was saying, but no, completely concur on Tyler Higbee.
Nice.
Yeah, interesting play on the main slate too. I almost brought him up on Cashing Points. I think he's just someone everyone's kind of forgotten about. In like a similar vein to Deontay Johnson on the 6-game slate. Like this is a guy who we've seen have a relatively large role, or at least a much larger role than this week's DraftKings salary would imply. You could see both of their teams kind of saying, okay, well, it's the playoffs. Like we may as well roll these guys out here in full-time roles because it's now or never type of deal. So yeah, I definitely don't hate the Tyler Higbee interest this week. Yeah,
certainly think that's reasonable. Derek Brown said it's been the second dude versus 2 high, 7 targets last game. Yeah, Derek, I mean, I think those are pretty solid notes for Tyler Higbee. I think especially relative to ownership, really, really hard slate to save on salary, at least from the DFS side. So Higbee is a really interesting play, a guy I'm probably going to force in a bit more than the field will when I submit my entries tomorrow. Looks like we're going to end up, I think we played that perfectly in terms of, betting where Darnold would end up going. B-Tice ended up drafting Jalen Hurts, by the way, which is interesting. Got Darnold, Kyron Williams, Aaron Jones, Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, Mark Andrews. So 5-player game stack from Rams Vikings. The hope with a team like this is our boy Mark Andrews drops 20. All the other games kind of suck. And then Minnesota, Los Angeles is one of the best or the best game on the slate from a scoring perspective. Have time for another draft or two. Again, if you guys have any playoff questions, feel free to drop them in the chat here. I'll hop in a Wildcat. Ryan, anything you're reflecting on with this season? I know I kind of asked you this last week, things you've done like good or bad, but I don't know. I'm big on reflecting and, sort of thinking about the things that I did good or bad. Has there been, has anything come to mind to you, like either since I asked you that question or sort of as you've been reviewing this playoff slate?
Yeah, it was kind of something we talked about earlier today, actually, when we were reviewing slate breakdown. Just from like a writing style perspective, I think for a lot of this year and for a lot of my career, like as a fantasy analyst, I very much write in a way that is like, I need to show you all the things I know. Like I need to prove to you that I have all these stats and I know all these things, and I need to really show my work, and make sure that like no one can argue against my take here, and that it's like definitively I'm laying it all out on the table here. These are all the arguments and counters, and I've completely integrated everything. But when you actually are the person that sits there and reads that, it's like, oh my God, like why is this blurb about Josh Allen so long when it can literally just say Josh Allen has scored 50 fantasy points this year, and he can do that again, like on this slate, like that.
Yeah.
If that's kind of what it boils down to, just like leading with what the actual point is, what the important argument is, and just leaving it at that, and like letting that stand on its own, is kind of something I'm going to be working on in my own writing. Just in terms of like how I'm approaching things going forward. Cause that's definitely something like I see and have seen in my writing for a long time that probably could be improved.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I'll have more to say on this after we pick. We drew the 101 here, Ryan. 101's always tough for me because, again, I think Puka, Bucky Irving are the best overall plays of the slate. Granted, not guys I want to take every time when I draw the 101, or else you won't end up with any Saquon, any Henry. What direction do you want to go?
We can just click Saquon here. I know
right.
He's your preference between the two. Derek Brown in the chat. We have it on our calendar to make fun of Scott Barrett over his Marvin Mims love from this offseason. I don't know. Is Scott going to let us have that one, D-Bro? Like Mims has like scored touchdowns in recent weeks. I was talking with Thomas Tipple earlier today. He thinks Mims is going to go ahead of Cortland Sutton in dynasty startups this year. So I don't know if we were right on the Marvin Mims thing. We might have to. To be clear, I think that's super wrong. I would not be assigning real dynasty value to Marvin Mims just because Sean Payton likes to scheme touches to him, and he averages like 0.6 yards per out run when he's lined up on the outside. But I think people around the industry might, or at least I think ADP might in certainly in a dynasty context. So I don't know if we were right on that one.
I think in best ball too, you're going to see Mims get pushed up way higher than what's optimal. I mean, just thinking about next year, there's a pretty good chance Marvin Mims is still very efficient and is still stuck at between 45 and 60% of routes, in which case his, if it's like a 12th round best ball ADP, that's going to be pretty ridiculous. Granted, did have 3 games of his last 5 over 22 DraftKings points, but 4 targets, 5 targets, 8 targets, 5 targets. That's not exactly a super compelling profile, even though he is really explosive. I mean, I think everyone who plays fantasy football wants to see what would happen if you gave Marvin Mims an 85% route share, but you just really can't bank on that. And I know the assumption of rational coaching is something that has got all of us into trouble at various points in our fantasy careers. Ryan, we are at the 2-3 turn here. We have Saquon Barkley. What direction do you want to go? We could draft another running back, which I think is pretty reasonable. Could go running back.
It's easy to click like Terry Jaden is pretty easy, I think.
Yeah, Terry Jaden's pretty reasonable. Yeah, you know what? Let's do that. I believe I only have one. Here, we can check this with the great tools at bestballoverlay.com. I actually have not drafted the Jaden Daniels Terry McLaurin combo yet. So obviously want to get a little bit of that. We've said this time and time again. It's felt like Terry McLaurin has been largely overdrafted because everyone just wants a stacking partner for Jaden Daniels, who is always very highly drafted, and I think rightfully so. This week, though, I feel like McLaurin's, ADP in BRs and his price on DraftKings is pretty reasonable, to the point that for the first time in, maybe a month and a half, 2 months, I'm actually a little excited to play McLaurin. I mean, we know he has the upside, and obviously this matchup against Tampa Bay is incredible in pretty much every regard, right?
Yeah, no, amazing on paper matchup, cover 3 schematic matchup. McLaurin ranks top 7 in yards per out run against that shell this year. So yeah, just all looks pretty good for Terry. Debro in the chat about Mims being in the Joker role. You're right. But that is more that's even more like evidence that it's fake, because there have been like 5 guys in the Joker role since this time last year that we thought would be the Sean Payton Joker. I remember we had this conversation about Jaleel McLaughlin at points throughout the offseason.
I took so much
remember when
Jaleel
he was
McLaughlin at best ball.
Yeah, remember when he was supposed to be the Joker. So yeah, you're right. They could draft someone, or Sean Payton can just change his mind at literally any point throughout the offseason, throughout the season. And then Mims is dust, because he's not actually getting open or earning targets like in a legitimate way that like a real NFL wide receiver would have to do. So
Ryan, I know
definitely.
I know you've noted before in your writing, and I thought this was one of like the best sort of quotes from last offseason, is that, hyper efficiency is sort of a known precursor specifically for running backs to an increase in volume the subsequent year. Have you looked into that at all for wide receivers? Is there any sort of truth to that? I would imagine there is, but especially in like the Marvin Mims case, where we've seen hyper efficiency for multiple years now, and tons of explosive plays and just no real increase in role. I don't know. What do you sort of think about all that?
Yeah, I mean, the track record of efficient, like per route, I'm just thinking of rookies right now, rookie wide receivers.
Yeah.
The track record of like efficient per route rookie wide receiver, even if he was in like a part-time, or let's draft here first before I go on this rant.
Yeah. We're deciding between Dobbins and Jones, and then we need either a wide receiver or a tight end.
Let's click Dobbins, since we took Jones last draft.
Oh yeah,
I guess.
So we'll grab Dobbins
Is McMillan gone? Yeah.
McMillan would be a good pick. He is gone. Freiermuth would probably be best available overall. Let me check our projections here real quick.
Yeah, I'm fine clicking Freiermuth and then figuring out the last wide receiver, whether we do like Zacchaeus
I don't think
whatever.
Yeah, I really don't think there's going to be a big drop off at wide receiver in terms of what we're looking at here. All right, I will take Freiermuth. So far, we have a Jaden Daniel, Saquon Barkley, Dobbins, Terry McLaurin, Pat Freiermuth. Team still need another wide receiver to round us out. Sorry, Ryan, you continue on your efficiency rank.
So like per route efficiency for rookie wide receivers who at some point earn, it doesn't even have to be a full-time role. I just want you actually like running real routes. Like, are there any games where you have a 70% route share? Are like, hopefully some of them are like on the outside would be nice too. Like that was this. I remember this was the argument with Rashee Rice last year, where it was, he was in a part-time role for the first half of the year, was efficient the whole time, but like he was in the slot in the second half of the year with a full-time role. But like you can split that out. He was still winning on the outside when he was out there. Obviously, Rashee Rice, it seemed like that thesis was going to hit this past year. So I'm always happy to buy into over the full season. Maybe they only became a full-time player at the end of the year and they were efficient the whole time. That's great. Like rocket ship emoji. But yeah, when it's Marvin Mims and you haven't hit even a 50% route share at any point in the season, you have literally no production from the outside. Literally all of your production is on screens, is out of the backfield. It's just like this is Kadarius Toney. Like that's essentially what we're dealing with here.
That's awful. Kadarius Toney, who is
another
better,
Scott Barrett name. Yeah.
Kadarius Toney, who is better at explosive plays, I think would be probably the best comp right now. Kadarius was certainly not getting as many, 40, 50, 60-yard touchdowns, wasn't taking kickoffs to the house quite like Marvin Mims has been. But yeah, in terms of the role, I mean, God, I was hoping to never hear Kadarius Toney's name again, but I do feel like that's a fairly good comp for what's happening right now with our boy Marvin Mims. All right, Ryan, we're coming up on our last pick here. Again, we got Jaden Daniels, Saquon, J.K. Dobbins, Terry McLaurin, Pat Freiermuth. We could go with the Zacchaeus double stack. I think best player in terms of raw projection would be Quentin Johnston, which is a tough sell. Could also go with like a Bateman. I don't know. Do you have a take on any of these wide receivers?
I don't want to click QJ. Kill me.
Yeah, no one does. So that honestly, that
yeah,
probably means he's going off if neither of us want him.
that's true. You're right.
All
You're
right.
right. Yeah, we
Yeah.
can go
No,
QJ plus Dobbins. That works
yeah.
fine.
And
Yeah.
and that's sort of just a bet that like the Chargers roll, but the game isn't good enough for Justin Herbert to get you there, which I think is a pretty reasonable bet. Really like that team is sort of we get I think a single stack with Jaden for the most part is what I want, and then we get to attack the Chargers side of that game. Hope that's a blowout. Get a solid projected tight end and Pat Fryermuth, and then obviously we get Saquon Barkley, who is of course going to score 40 points. Yeah, I think Derek Brown has a good comment when it relates to the wide receiver efficiency argument that he says he thinks it might relate more to ass and not as much for yards per route run, first downs per route run. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And Ryan, I'm sure that's something you'll end up looking into a little bit more in the off season, which is why we always love our Ryan Heath off season articles around here. Yeah, Ryan, anything to add on that before we wrap up and get out of here?
Yeah, not really. Yeah, I'm interested to kind of go back over the past few years of average separation score sample we have, and see like what the signal is there. Yeah, I can't think of a reason that it would be super different, aside from like getting rid of the Marvin Mimses of the world that are getting all of their production on screens. I mean that certainly is one way to like filter that out. But yeah, there's just going to be other stuff you have to account for there too. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I don't know if ass is going to be like it's too late for me to think of a good word. The thing that the thing that explains everything. I don't know. And to put it,
the skeleton
in too many
key.
words, but the skeleton key. Yeah.
Sure, yeah, certainly makes sense. I do think that's really interesting, and I'll also be very intrigued if you or me end up diving into that in more detail here in the off season. Guys, this will end up being our last show of the year for the Underdog Drafter Party. So this is our grand finale. Keep in mind that I will be posting rankings that you can upload straight into Underdog in our Discord, which is free to join, by the way. Fantasy Points Discord, Underdog Battle Royale channel, also free. So you can get these rankings totally for free. A lot of the best channels are paywalled. Not the case for our Underdog Battle Royale channel. So I'll drop rankings in there tomorrow. Our plan for next week, again, no show, but we will be dropping rankings earlier in the week. And obviously me and Ryan will be around all week in Discord to answer any questions you guys may have. I'm sure we'll give, maybe like a mini 200-300 word breakdown each on sort of where our stands are for the slate. I think the tough part with these playoff slates, I'm sure this will be the case next week as well, is that ADP is generally pretty efficient by this point in the year. We're only left with good teams. We aren't really guessing on usage at this point. So the big thing, like we said over and over again on this show, is just please make sure to correlate your teams. Drafting wide receivers with your quarterback is absolutely huge. Ryan, hopefully you have wrapped up coughing. Why don't you tell the people where they can find your great work, what you're working on next week, and where people can find you as we head into the offseason here.
Yeah, find me on X at RyanJ_Heath. All my written work, as always, on FantasyPoints.com. And yeah, next week we're going to be on the divisional round slate breakdown. I thought we did a really good job with the wild card slate breakdown, which is live on the site right now. So looking forward to working with you on that again next week, Jake. And yeah, that's all I've got to shout out.
Yeah, if you guys are playing any DFS, you didn't have time to catch Cashing Points or any of the other great shows out there, either at Fantasy Points or around the industry, definitely check out the slate breakdown that me and Ryan wrote live over at FantasyPoints.com. We really go over every relevant play, give extremely in-depth breakdowns. As you heard, sometimes maybe they're a little too wordy, but that's because we're extremely detailed, extremely thorough with all the research that we do and what we're posting. In terms of my stuff, just like Ryan, I will also be helping out with the slate breakdown next week, so you can look out for that. I think I will be on Cashing Points next week as well. Not sure if that's set in stone, but I probably will be. And then beyond that, if you guys want to know where to find me in the spring, it will be over at FantasyPoints.com, grinding spring football. Obviously, have to get this plug out. I believe the season starts March 28th, right around there, end of March. I really should have that memorized for the outro here. I'll get it right on cashing points next week. But end of March is when the season starts. $100 for the spring football package. I promise there's no one else in the world who goes as insane for spring football as I do, because I have absolutely no life and I love it more than anything. So yeah, it's a ton of fun. We were super profitable, like plus 35% ROI on props. We had tons of subs crush in DFS. Orfield won several tournaments. I won a handful of smaller field tournaments. So should be a really, really great UFL season. I am very, very excited for spring football. So yeah, if you guys want an edge, if you want to gamble on football in the spring that's being played then and not several months from now, like you would if you're, drafting best ball teams, which is, great. No problem with that. But just saying, there's professional football being played in the spring, and I think we should all be gambling on it at least a little bit. So you guys will know where to find me, UFL DFS over at FantasyPoints.com. With that lengthy spring football plug out of the way, Ryan, I think this has been a really great season. I've really enjoyed doing this show with you. Me and Ryan had never spoken until our first episode of this show. So quite the icebreaker for us, but yeah, it's been a ton of fun, man. Anything you want to say before we get out of here? Any reflections on the show? Anything like that?
Yeah, no, it's been a really awesome ride. This has been like my favorite part of the week every single week. Yeah, had a really fun time with you all season, Jake. Hopefully we get to run this back next year, because it's been a lot of fun, and it's been great.
Yeah, no, it has been. Really appreciate everybody who's watched, who's interacted in the chat. We really enjoyed answering everybody's questions all year, helping you guys draft some Battle Royale teams, and we've really enjoyed interacting with y'all in Discord. So again, be on the lookout for those rankings tomorrow, and we will see all of you at the top of the leaderboards. What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.